Welcome to another episode of Rooted and Restored. My name is Lisa Rowe, and I'm here with my stepdaughter, Callie Rowe, and we are excited to bring another really big conversation to you today that feels personally inspired, and it also feels inspired for the relevant holiday that we're going to be celebrating this month. And wanting to talk to mothers, those that wished they could have been mothers, those that have lost motherhood, those that have wounds to motherhood, those that are enjoying motherhood, those that are challenged by motherhood. We're just talking all about motherhood today, and hopefully Callie can pull some real nuggets out today from her experience with me, but also just some recent experiences I've had myself, always trying to bring relevant, relatable information to those of you who follow us, and so we're just going to jump right in. So Cal, I'm going to let you take over.
Awesome. Okay. So I feel like a common assumption, but I feel like it's gotten better over the last few years as like mental health's been more of a priority, is that I feel like Mother's Day comes around and everybody's presumed that it's supposed to be a happy holiday. But sometimes people, like you said, have lost motherhood or they have strained relationships with their mothers. So I feel like there's also some hurt that can be surrounded with the holiday.
You're absolutely right. And what comes to mind is some of the folks that I've served in reproductive loss space, but just in other spaces too, is that oftentimes churches, unknowingly and with good intent, will have all the mothers in the room stand up, and then they walk around, give them flowers, and there's this like really beautiful thing that happens for those mothers in the room that are then cherished, and they feel valued and maybe recognized in that moment. But what we've come to realize, and what was unknown to me maybe 5 years ago, is that what about those women in the room who maybe have lost a child, that are dealing with the grief and loss and aren't sure if they should stand up or not? Maybe women who have experienced some level of reproductive loss, stillbirth, miscarriage, abortion. Do they stand up? Do they recognize that? Maybe your mother wasn't the best example for you and you haven't chosen to have children, or I have women who've chosen their career instead of choosing pregnancy, and other experiences that sometimes are highlighting those wounds inside of us in those experiences. And that goes to commercials, that goes to the card section at Target, that goes to the flowers that are at the front of the grocery store. I mean, these are just areas, because we celebrate this holiday in the United States, that like mothers, motherhood, mother, it's like in your face times 10.
Yeah. And not that it's a bad thing to celebrate, like it's a great thing to celebrate, but also just recognizing and being conscientious that there are some people, like you said, that are kind of in the limbo, that are dealing with their grief or their emotions, and they don't really know where they stand yet, and they're trying to navigate it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we really want to explore today, right? Is how do we blend both of these experiences? How do we blend that woman who couldn't have children for 15 years and she finally gets pregnant, she's super stoked to be a mom, and how do we blend that with the woman who is now 65 and is looking back at her life and going, I wish I would have chosen that experience, or all the other things I shared earlier. And so I think we're going to try to do our best to navigate how to honor women and motherhood, especially because our culture is narrating this for us in the month of May.
So I guess like diving more into you and like your perception of Mother's Day, how do you feel like your childhood and like motherhood kind of like groomed you and like your perception of motherhood as an adult, or how it kind of shaped you and your understanding of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Callie. And I think where I really want to start is that it's been like an onion for me. I'm really wrestling with this in my stage of life and with my teenage daughters right now. I didn't as much with you, because as your stepmom, it didn't feel as close, but it does with biological children, which is another element to the conversation. Blended families, step parenting. Do you honor your stepmother during Mother's Day? Do you, like, this is another thing that maybe you want to hold on to unpack. But to stay with your question, my mom and I had a somewhat tumultuous relationship, especially in my teenage years. And it really happened post-divorce for me with my mom. in fourth grade, my parents divorced, and initially my mom was like sole custodian. My dad had like visiting rights. And then in eighth grade, that all changed, and my dad received more permanent custody where I visited my mom. And reflecting now, like it was only once a month in some of the most defining years as a woman in that stage of life. And so I remember in those years where I was learning how to shave and what to do during my period and what to do with these feelings about boys and my own self-esteem and insecurity and how to stay organized amidst being raised by a man that wasn't that organized and like what that looked like. I would walk down the aisles during May and I wouldn't resonate with the words on those cards because I felt at some level that my mom had abandoned me. We've talked about this, but we'll continue. There's a generational pattern in our family of codependency, and I've written a book. My mom helped co-author one of the chapters, so this is very much a live story in our family. My mom is open to having these conversations. Her and I have been on a healing journey for a long time, and so when I'm speaking, it's not to resurrect pain, it's to hopefully help other people who might be navigating this, because we certainly have been given an opportunity to do that, and I'm super grateful. And I know there's people listening that haven't had that opportunity, and I hope maybe some of this story provides hope, but also knowing that like I didn't know this was ever going to happen in this season of life at 14, 15, 16 years old, when it was like, Mom, thank you for all that you've always done for me. You've always been my number one cheerleader. When I'd read that and I'd say, gosh, my mom would choose men over me. I didn't know what it was at the time, but like her codependency was so thick. The things that I was watching her do did not make any sense to me. And so there was this period of my life that my mom and I were very distant. And I would tell you today that I don't think I would have ever chosen to become a mom unless for my codependency and the men that I was with wanting to have children. And that's hard for me to admit. I mean, because I think the cultural norm is like, you're a woman, you're excited. We live to our wedding dresses at 13 years old and we plan our weddings. And that was not my story. And I didn't always understand why that was so different for me, because I was not resonating with the girls in college. They've been talking about this, like, can't wait to be a mom. I want to have a girl and I'm going to name her this. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, that is not who I am. And so, that I think that really left an imprint for me. Like, do I even want to be a mom? Like, do I even know what it looks like to be a mom? And it's not for lack of effort. My mom would visit me in college, but there was just this major elephant that like was sitting on my chest all the time that my mom was really good at doing. She was really good at organizing. She was really good at painting my college room. She was really, but like being there emotionally for me was very difficult for her. And so to your question, I just think that it's come in seasons. And now when I pick out cards for her, when I celebrate her, it's thank you, Mom, for doing the work, right? Thank you for aligning with what was healthy for our family. I see her differently with you and our other children. I see her trying to make amends in those ways, and I'm grateful for those experiences as I have been maturing myself.
How do you feel like that took a part in when you became a mother, and how like your perception was for yourself or navigating like Mother's Day and stuff like that? Like you were in the thick, like you said, of codependency, or also like you didn't even know if you would want to be a mother if it weren't for the men that you were with at the time. So how do you feel like you were grappling and like navigating that?
Yeah. Before I answer your question, I just feel like maybe there's somebody listening that's like, damn, all I've ever wanted to do is be a mom. And here you are talking about the fact that you didn't want to be a mom. Why do you get this option? You didn't even want to. And I just want to say I can hear you. And I just want to say that, like, that's real. And I would be remiss if I didn't just speak my truth in that right now. And to just kind of explore what you said, my first year of parenting Riley, which is my 14-year-old biological child, and she came just 2 years before you came into my life, was a hellacious experience. And I can only say that now looking back, right? Because everybody wants you to glamorize your pregnancy. Everybody wants you to glamorize the infancy world. And it was absolutely some of the most difficult times I had. My pregnancy was terrible. I was sick all the time. I was driving down the road absolutely freaking sick every day. I had a plastic bag in my car. It was just so difficult for me. And so difficult that like I had to name, I didn't know if she was a boy or a girl at the time. I had to name her so that I knew what this thing that was doing this to me like actually had like a humanity, you know, a persona. Um, but I mean, it was just, it was a lot for me. I didn't like, not, I was already abandoning myself, my body. Now to have something like living inside of my body and like not knowing what to do with it was so hard for me. And I didn't know how to embrace it. I fought it most of my pregnancy. And then when she was born, I became like this, there's a metaphor in mind that like the helicopter mom kind of comes to mind, but like smothering. I felt like I wouldn't let anybody else hold her. I felt like I was not trusting in myself, let alone anybody else. I felt like I lost who I was, what I was, and I didn't realize it at the time. And so many of my clients struggle with this too, is that I was trying so hard not to relive experiences that my mom had. Maybe my mom has done some really deep work in her healing work that she talks about. When I was born, she had major depression, and that like she has flashbacks of me being in my crib in this really dark room. And although she was trying her best, like she didn't know how to give me what I needed. And so that lives in our body somewhere, right? And I think I just was really trying not to repeat that. And all I was doing was like going to the other side of that. We talk about that, like, right, that extreme behavior. So that first year was hell. And come to find out that during that season of my life, what also was making it even more hellish is I was going through some really tough times in my marriage at the time. And I didn't feel supported, but I was also isolating myself, right? So, you know, there's that pregnancy followed unexpectedly by my next daughter, who I was not expecting that pregnancy. I was in the midst of a separation that landed in divorce. And I just remember going, I can't do this. My other daughter is going to be 17 months old when she's born. I cannot do this. I'm divorcing this man. Like, I don't understand what the hell am I supposed to do? And I remember considering what it would look like to abort Sydney and how to do that. And nobody had ever talked to me about what abortion even was or what it looked like. But I remember staying up at night going like, I just hope that this pregnancy takes care of itself. Like, there were so many experiences within me that just, because I didn't trust myself, because I was in this very vulnerable situation, I didn't know how to manage myself, that it was a really hard second pregnancy. I wasn't as sick as much. And for everybody looking from the outside in, they would think she's fine, because I knew how to put the face on and disguise all of it. But I was up at every morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, on my knees, like just wondering what this would look like. And I didn't decide to go through the abortion experience, and I chose that like this was going to be my journey, and it must have been on purpose. And I remember naming her similarly to how I did Riley, Sydney Grace, because I knew I was going to need the grace of God to parent these two girls by myself and amidst all this chaos that was going on. And then you came into my life, and now I'm repeating other patterns in my life, right? Where now I'm blending a family, and you have your own issues related to your family of origin, and navigating another woman in your life because you had a history of like that dysfunctional behavior too. And now here I am, two little kids and now a 12-year-old, like, and you were in the midst of all of yours, right? And like, I'm sure now looking back, which is happening now, there was some of that, if I was more present with my healing, that was triggering all those years, that like that was when my life changed, right? Seventh grade was when like really everything started to change for me in terms of like moving through my parents' divorce situation, the separation, and then living with my dad. That was like a pivotal year for me. And this is coming up too, you know, at the banquet we went to for Young Life the other day. Didn't she say, the director, seventh grade is one of the hardest years. Seventh grade, and then the first year after college, or the first year after high school. I was, because you get your period, you're just in this like space. Middle school's hard. And so here I was feeling incredibly responsible, because not too long after I met you, you moved in with us. It was like 5 or 6 months after that, like you moved in with us, and then managing a new relationship with your dad. I mean, it was crazy, right? And so anyway, I feel like those 3 experiences were pivotal based on my history. And then, then we have your half brother, my stepson, and then Brooks was born, our together child that blends us all together. And that, what a different experience for me that pregnancy was, that parenting journey was. I was so much more present. And I know people say through the journey, as you parent more children, as you bring, it becomes easier to manage all the feels and everything like this. But I think I was the most healthiest in that space, that maybe I wasn't carrying as much baggage as I journeyed forward.
For, Riley and Sydney, it sounds like there was fear for you going into those pregnancies and unknowns, and right, operating out of fear instead of rationale, because you didn't have a soundboard to help process things through, right? You just had everything that you didn't want, and you felt like you were isolating yourself, but also that you were isolated. Do you feel like going into your pregnancy with Brooks that it was different?
I was different. I think some of my situation was similar because I'm still on this journey of healing from codependency. So my relationship with your dad wasn't super strong. There was lots that was being worked out, but I was a different version of myself and more mature. I had started the healing journey. My mom and I had started. That's a cool thing, just putting it together. My mom and I had already started that journey, 4 years prior, 5 years prior. So there was that. She was more of a friend, if you will, and life had kind of grown a lot for me in some of my awareness.
That makes sense. Okay. And then what do you feel like is the difference, from your experiences, right? I feel like you became a step parent while you were still navigating life with your biological two girls at the time, and I feel like hearing you say it was just kind of a circus or chaos, and you trying to figure out and pull pieces apart of what makes sense. How do you feel like it's been different for you to navigate motherhood as a step parent and then also as a biological parent?
Yeah. And this is a cool conversation because you and I were given permission, 8th grade year for you, from your therapist at the time, Dr. Kennard. She said, why do you have to name it stepmom? Why don't you name it what fits for you? That's a label that the world gives you, and maybe there's expectations connected to it. And so with her permission, you and I began to negotiate such a different conversation. And what fit for us at the time is more like mentor. And in that space, I feel like I was able to relieve myself of so many of those mother expectations. And we've had that conversation so many times because I feel like for those people listening, sometimes all the step parents that I serve and myself, all we need is to know that we don't have to feel the same way that we do for our biological children. I mean, that was such a relief for me because I'm questioning myself all the time going, why don't I feel for you the same way I feel for these children that I brought into the world biologically? And people listening might go, whoa, that's a big deal. But it was so relieving for me because I was fighting something that wasn't natural, right? And so to love you because I want to love you, and to name that I'm not going to have that unconditional love, it's just not biologically connected to us. And people will argue that all day long, but I will sit in a room and navigate that personally. That has never been my story. And this goes for foster children, it goes for adopted children. We get to love, right? But there's a difference. And so I think it's just always important to name that when we're negotiating that. So once I had that freedom to know that I could be different for you than I was the other, and you were older too, it allowed for us to negotiate what that pathway looked like. And I think our conversations were different. I think even just the way I discipline you feels different than the way I discipline our other children. You were older at the time, but there was a lot of other dysfunction with your mom and stuff like this. So it just allowed us to create something that was unique to us. Where with your brother, your half brother, my stepson, I also feel the same way. There's things that I don't do with him that I let your dad and his mom do because I know my place in that relationship, and I know that I don't intuitively always have an understanding of what he's going through because his blood does not run through me. Where there's something that happens when you biologically bring children into the world that you just have an intuitive sense to it. Not that I don't know you, right? I want that to be clear, or know Bo, but there's a part of you that is not connected to me, right? your introvertedness. I'll never get that, right? And not to say we don't bring children into the world that are different than us, but all three of the children I have brought into this world are, there's parts of them that I can recognize in them that make it connected. So all of that to say that I think that the best thing that ever happened was Dr. Kennard and giving us the freedom to do that. And then your dad and I being able to name that, and then us being able to name it with our children. Riley and Sydney are constantly saying things like, why doesn't Robbie do this with me? Or what's this about? And there's just this reference point that I feel free to share based on what we developed with you that I can navigate with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't expect Bo to bring me flowers and this really beautiful card on Mother's Day. I'm not his mom,
Mm-hmm.
right? If he does, it's beautiful and I honor it and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something in my heart that goes, oh, I need this.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think some stepmoms and stepparents live with this expectation that their stepchildren are all never going to happen. And when I worked in foster care to substantiate this, I would have so many children who were abused by their biological parents tell me to my face, like, when can I move back with them? Mm-hmm. There's not, like, you and I would see it as they were hurt by them. Mm-hmm. But inside of them, those children wanted nothing. They longed for that connection to their biological parent. Nobody could replace that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah. And I think, like, just going back on what you said, just like how it gave you relief, right? Like, of this pressure. I think as a kid going through and navigating what it looks like to have a step parent, or, you know, your dad has a girlfriend or vice versa, that's really prevalent in your life. I think that naturally, like, navigating that as a kid, obviously different ages breed different things, and the relationship with the person all makes the situation different. But overall, if somebody comes in trying to parent you, right, there can be some resentment there depending on what's going on with your biological parent. So I think being able to name it at that point, like, allowed some, like, pressure to alleviate off of you. But then also for me at the time, it was like, oh, okay, like, she's there, she's chilling, like, she's helping, but she's not trying to, like, replace my mom. And I think I knew that, and I think there was, like, a level of, like, peace with that, because I knew that you were at no point, like, ever overstepping, but you also, like, cultivated a relationship with me. It was never, oh, I'm dating your dad or I'm married to your dad, so then, like, I have the ability to, like, punish you or whatever. Like, you created a relationship with me. Like, you chose to do that, right? So I think those deposits then allowed for, like, some of the harder conversations to be received better, instead of, like, walls going up. No, that they don't go up sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's life. But I think it allowed for a relationship to be created, because it's not there naturally, like you said. You have to choose to create it. So I think, like, just, like, kind of, like, reminiscing on, like, that situation, I feel like from a kid perspective, like, that's how it, like, lived in me too. And absolutely. I think even, like, I can remember, like, a conversation, I don't remember what it was, but when I went into your and dad's room and you were like, oh, I'm gonna have dad here just because he understands you in, like, a different way, right? Because you try and you do know me, but sometimes, like, how you say things or delivery just, like, hits a place in me differently, where, like, you can try super hard and you do really good, and I know you try, but then sometimes dad just sitting there, like, right, he, like, takes it and names it, and then it's like, oh, mm-hmm. like, being, like, a mediator in a way. Not that that's always needed, but, like, you knew at that time, for whatever situation was going on, that, like, that was helpful for us in the moment.
Yeah, because there's your blood and his blood are running through both of you, right? And mm-hmm. he is an introvert just like you, and there's lots of elements of things that even you're dealing with right now that he has perspective on. Mm-hmm. And wow, like, we just can't take that for granted. I feel like that's an incredible superpower to have as you're negotiating the blendedness of families. But also, this kind of can also apply to two-parent homes, biological homes too. Like, if one parent's doing the majority of the raising and the other parent's pretty absent, I think you're doing that child a huge disservice, because if you know both of you are made that child, you both have perspectives about what this looks like. I had a family in here the other day, and dad's been absent more than mom has, and you can tell they have boys, and you can tell that they're that the boys haven't had that more masculine version, and empowering the dad to get more involved, because those boys, parts of him are in those boys, and he understands, and also helping the mother understand that, like, it is a beautiful thing to have both folks, even though their perspectives and lived experiences are different. Having that blend and being, open to each other's perspectives is a huge asset to raising children.
Yeah, and like you said, like in a lot of homes it is absent, or
Mhm.
there is one parent that's a little bit more like dominant in the role of caretaking the child, and you can see how it comes off on the child and how it affects them differently.
Yeah. And, this is also coming up for me as I think about this. We hear this saying, small children, small problems, big children, bigger problems. And I absolutely think that's accurate. I know that the challenges in toddlerhood are different than the challenges in teenage world and young adult world. Those are the seasons we've traveled so far. And I think back to the times in, like, I was never sleeping and I didn't know if I was ever going to get out of it, and getting rid of the pacifier and sleeping alone, and navigating potty training, and then the biting state. I mean, there was just so much that I was like, I don't know if I can even wake up tomorrow and, like, remember what I'm doing, because it just felt so overwhelming. But I will submit to you that absolutely that was a preparation for where I'm at right now and where I am with you. Absolutely. But I would say too that, back to the blended conversation, I met you when you were 12, right? All those years that I wasn't involved in your life, there was somebody else doing that work or not doing that work. And that's been our journey too, right? As we've been navigating what it looks like to be in each other's lives and to parent in the capacity that I am for you. Like, I always have to remember, always, and I would hope that those listening, like, understand this: adoptive parents, foster parents, maybe you're a caregiver because something happened to the sole provider, but, like, there's makeup time, if you can even make it up, that has to happen in order to, like, you just don't jump in at 12 years old and, like, all that time spent. I mean, those years of raising toddlers and infants and preschoolers pays dividends now, right? There's things that I'm teaching my teenagers right now that I didn't, you and we're in a different season, that maybe just now I'm teaching you, or you're now grasping, like, because it just wasn't there. So I think that's important too, that those listening, like, wherever we are in the parenting journey, to be able to name these things.
So I think even like what you're saying there is that, like, not comparing your kids, because I'm sure, I can imagine as a mother, right, when you have more than one child, there can be a level of comparison or maybe failure that lives within you if they're at different places or seasons in life. Do you want to speak on that at all?
Yeah, it's powerful. And I think that we say a lot in our family, fair isn't always equal. And I say that to piggyback what you just said, that not all of our not every single one of our children is made the same, and they all need different things based on their experiences. And just so happens that the 3 children that I have biologically brought into this world are more vocal, more argumentative, maybe more extroverted, where the 2 children that your daddy has brought into this world are more introverted, more quiet. And I always say, I would rather the loud, obnoxious screaming back at me, because at least I know what's going on, than the silent suffering that you and Bo sometimes do. And so, to that point, I used to personalize those experiences. I used to not know how to navigate them. Why does she stay in her room all the time? You're like, all the things. And I've now, as I've developed and understood myself and asked questions and gotten curious, realized that, yeah, each one of you is very unique, and each one of you sees the world differently. We've talked about the Enneagram, but that has paid dividends for me, knowing who Daddy and I are, but also knowing how each of you guys see the world. Depersonalizing has allowed me to be objective as a parent, to meet each one of you as best as I can where you are, ask questions that I feel like are important to the space and place that you live, in your mind, in your heart, in your body. And that's really been beneficial. This also is something that's more recent for me that I feel like pertains to this conversation. And it has to do with this idea that, we've talked about this before, but this like idea that we all hold mirrors up when we're negotiating relationships, and we see ourselves through those mirrors. So if you had a mirror up and I had a mirror up, when I look at you, I see the best parts of myself, but I also see the worst parts of myself because it's like glaringly obvious reflecting back at me, and vice versa. And this is happening with all the children and everyone else in my life. And what's happening to me in this season is because of my awareness and healing, I'm noticing that parenting Riley and Sydney, 13 and 14 years old, these pathways that I didn't get with my mom are being renegotiated now. And so the things that they're sharing with me, the experiences we're having that I never had with my mom, wow. Like I stop sometimes. Like we were in the store the other day, Victoria's Secret, Sydney was getting a new bra, and I was just like, I remember having to do this myself. Or I remember having to do this with my dad sitting in the lobby. And I was like, what a different experience this is, that I'm actually in the room with her, feeling around, trying to make sure it fits correctly and all of these things that like, that just was not my story. And just even the conversations that we're having. When Riley turns 15 next month, that is a staple in my life. That is when I chose to start having sex. I had tried every drug by that point, and to negotiate the ways in which Riley is managing the world, the way you've managed the world, I just am in awe of how different life is. And one thing Riley said to me at the dinner table, because I'm, I guess, victim of this, I always say, like, if you only knew what it was like for me. I feel like my parents used to say, it used to be 25 cents to buy a thing, and I would walk to the grocery store, and I would get home, I'd walk 2 miles after practice. I'm like, okay, Dad. But like, I'm doing that with my children. I've done that with you. And she looked at me with all the wisdom in the world and said, but that's not my experience, Mom. And I was like, touche. And in that moment, I went from, you're a ungrateful teenager to, holy cow, you didn't have those experiences. And at some level, I had something to do with that. And what a different perspective that was. I just sat there and looked at her. I'm like, you're not wrong. And I paid that forward with a client the other day, and he was like, I just paid all this money for this wedding, my ungrateful son, blah, blah, blah. And I said, but wait a second. Like, let's just, every coin has two sides. Let's just flip that. You did that. Who did that for you? Right? Did you do that because you wanted to? Heck yeah. Like, and I was like, then live in that. Like, just hold space for that. You can be mad at him for being ungrateful or causing fights or whatever. But like, look what you were able to do as a provider, as a father. You were able to change a paradigm there. So that lives inside of me now. It's just a mechanism to access, to go, I'm living experiences with Riley and Sydney that I didn't have biologically, and what a gift of healing because I'm available for it, but also finding myself feeling incredibly triggered at times and negotiating that too. And those triggers are teaching me things every day. And I'm realizing I can finally name it. Like, the reason this feels so triggering, not only adolescence is wildly crazy, right? But I'm learning alongside of them some of the things that I didn't get to learn when I was their age.
But how cool is it that you can be open to it, right? Or that you're aware and naming it, like, it's okay that you're being triggered. It makes sense, right? You have motherly wounds, right, that still follow you. They don't disappear. And they're just choosing to be healed as you continue this journey.
Yeah. And the mirror that's coming back to me is just, I'm glad I'm open to it today. And I'm thankful that my mom did the work that she did to create a space for her and I to be realigned and connected. And that's allowing for this process to take place too. I'm incredibly grateful.
So, as we end today, is there anything else you want to say to any mothers that are listening today?
Yeah, that motherhood, I think, there's a spectrum, right? And no matter where we are, I think it's valuable that we connect with ourselves first and know that motherhood doesn't have to look like the culture says it does. That inside all of us, there's the answer, the key to whatever this thing is that feels triggering right now, and to get curious about it and to negotiate why walking into a store feels the way that it does, or what what could be possible if you did access that key inside of you, maybe with a little support, right, from a therapist or a mentor, or a journey forward. If there's stuck grief or something else that's icky sticky, the navigation of that is so worth it, and I'm living proof of that. And getting to see the fruit of all of that is absolutely invaluable. So allowing maybe a shift in this season of May, Mother's Day, that maybe this is happening for such a time, and that if we turn inward and listen, there's a key to the answers that you're looking for.